This is part 17 of Good Omens. Lunchtime came and went. The new Spanish Inquisition reconvened. The head inquisitor inspected it critically. "What are those?" he demanded. "You click them together when you dance," said Wensleydale, a shade defensively. "My aunt brought them from Spain years ago. They're called maracas, I think. They've got a picture of a Spanish teacher on them. Look." "What's she dancing with a bull for?" said Adam. "That's to show it's Spanish," said Wensleydale. Adam let it pass. The bullfight poster was everything Brian had promised. Pepper had something rather like a gravy boat made out of raffia. "Thanks for putting wine in it," she said. "It's for putting wine in," she said defiantly. "My mother brought it back from Spain." "It hasn't got a bull on it," said Adam severely. "It doesn't have to," Pepper countered, moving just ever so slightly into a fighting stance. Adam hesitated. His sister Sarah and her boyfriend had also been to Spain. Sarah had returned with a very large purple toy donkey, while definitely Spanish did not come up to what Adam instinctively felt should be the tone of the Spanish Inquisition. The boyfriend, on the other hand, had brought back a very ornate sword, which, despite its tendency to bend when picked up and go blunt when asked to cut paper, proclaimed itself to be made of Toledo steel. Adam had spent an instructive half hour with the encyclopedia and felt that this was what the Inquisition needed. Subtle hints had not worked, however. In the end, Adam had taken a bunch of onions from the kitchen. They might have been Spanish, but even Adam had to concede that, as decor for the inquisitorial premises, they lacked that certain something. He was in no position to argue too vehemently about raffia wine holders. "Very good," he said. "You certain they're Spanish onions?" said Pepper, relaxing. "Course," said Adam. "Spanish onions. Everyone knows that." "They could be French," said Pepper doggedly. "France is famous for onions." "Doesn't matter," said Adam, who was getting fed up with onions. "France is nearly Spanish, and I don't expect witches know the difference, what with spending all their time flying around at night. It all looks like the Knug to witches. Anyway, if you don't like it, you can jolly well go and start your own Inquisition anyway." For once, Pepper didn't push it. She had been promised the post of head torturer. No one doubted who was going to be chief inquisitor. Wensleydale and Brian were less enthralled with their roles of inquisitorial guards. "Well, you don't know any Spanish," said Adam, whose lunch hour had included 10 minutes with a phrase book Sarah had brought him in a haste of romanticism in Alenconte. You can tell that I don't speak Spanish. Sorry, guys. "That doesn't matter, because actually you have to talk in Latin," said Wensleydale, who was also doing some very slightly more accurate lunchtime reading. "And Spanish," said Adam firmly. "That's why it's the Spanish Inquisition." "I don't see why it shouldn't be the British Inquisition," said Brian. Don't see why we should have fought the Armada and everything, just to have their smelly Inquisition." This had been slightly bothering Adam's patriotic sensibilities as well. "I reckon," he said, "that we should sort of start Spanish and then make it to the British Inquisition when we've got the hang of it. And now," he added, "the Inquisitorial Guard will go and fetch the first witch. Por favor." The new inhabitant of Jasmine Cottage would have to wait, they decided. What they needed to do was start small and work their way up. "Art thou a witch? Olé!" said the chief inquisitor. "Yes," said Pepper's little sister, who was 6 and built like a small golden-haired football. "You mustn't say yes, you've got to say no," hissed the head torturer, nudging the suspect. "And then what?" demanded the suspect. "And then we torture you to make you say yes," said the head torturer. "I told you, it's good fun, the torturing. It doesn't hurt. Hasta la vista," she added quickly. The little suspect gave the decor of the inquisitorial headquarters a disparaging look. There was a decided odor of onions. "Huh?" she said. "I want to be a witch, with a warty nose and a green skin and a lovely cat, and I'd call it Blackie, and lots of potions and—" The head torturer nodded to the chief inquisitor. "Look," said said Pepper desperately. No one's saying you can't be a witch, you just have to say you're not a witch. No point in us taking all this trouble, she added severely, if you're going to go around saying yes the minute we ask you. The suspect considered this. But I wants to be a witch, she wailed. The male of them exchanged exhausted glances. This was out of their league. If you just say no, said Pepper, you can have my Cindy Sable set. I've never even used it. I've never ever used it, she added, glaring at the other of them and daring them to make a comment. You have used it, snapped your sister. I've seen you, and it's all worn out, and the bit where you put the hay is broken, and Adam gave a magisterial cough. Art thou a witch? Viva España, he repeated. The sister took a look at Pepper's face and decided not to chance it. No, she decided. It was a very good torture, everyone agreed. The trouble was getting the punitive witch off it. It was a hot afternoon, and the inquisitorial guards felt like they were being put upon. I don't see why me and Brother Brian should have to do all the work, said Brother Wensleydale, wiping the sweat off his brow. I reckon it's about time she got off and we have a go. Benedictine decanter. Why have we stopped? Demanded the suspect, water pouring out of her shoes. It had occurred to the chief inquisitor during his researches that the British Inquisition was probably not yet ready for the reintroduction of the Iron Maiden and the choke pear. But an illustration of medieval ducking stool suggested that it was tailor-made for the purpose. All you needed was a pawn and some planks and a rope. It was a sort of combination that always attracted them, who never had much difficulty in finding all three. The suspect was now green to the waist. It's just like a seesaw, she said. Whee! I'm going to go home unless I can have a go, muttered Brother Brian. Don't see why evil witches should have all the fun. It's not allowed for inquisitors to be tortured too, said the chief inquisitor sternly, but without much feeling. It was a hot afternoon. The inquisitorial robes of old sacking were scratchy and smelled of stale barley, and the pawn looked astonishingly inviting. All right, he said, and turned to the suspect. You're a witch, all right, don't do it again. And now get off and let someone else have a go. Have a turn. Ole, he added. What happens now? Said Pepper's sister. Adam hesitated. Setting fire to her would probably cause no end of trouble, he reasoned. Besides, she was too soggy to burn. He was also distinctly aware that at some future point there would be questions asked about muddy shoes and duckweed-encrusted pink dresses. But that was the future, and it lay at the other end of a long, warm afternoon that contained planks and ropes and ponds. The future could wait. The future came and went in the mildly discouraging way that futures do, although Mr. Young had other things on his mind apart from muddy dresses and merely banned Adam from watching television, which meant he had to watch it on the old black and white set in his bedroom. I don't see why we should have a hose pipe ban, Adam heard Mr. Young telling Mrs. Young. I pay my rates like everyone else. The garden looks like the Sahara Desert. I'm surprised there was any water left in the pond. I blame it on the lack of nuclear testing myself. I used to get proper summers when I was a boy. It used to rain all the time. Now Adam slouched alone along the dusty lane. It was a good slouch. Adam had a way of slouching along that offended all right-thinking people. It wasn't that he just allowed his body to droop. He could slouch with inflections, and now the set of his shoulders reflected the hurt and bewilderment of those unjustly thwarted in their selfless desire to help their fellow men. Dust hung heavy on the bushes. Serve everyone right if the witches took over the whole country, made everyone eat health food and not go to church and dance around with no clothes on, he said, kicking a stone. He had to admit that, except perhaps for the health food, the prospect wasn't too worrying. I bet if they'd just let us get started properly, we could have found hundreds of witches, he told himself, kicking a stone. I bet old Torturmata didn't have to give up just when he was getting started, just because some stupid witch got her dress dirty. Dog slouched along dutifully behind his master. This wasn't, insofar as the hellhound had any expectations, what he had imagined life would be like in the last days before Armageddon, but despite himself, he was beginning to enjoy it. He heard his master say, Bet even the Victorians didn't force people to watch black and white television. Form shapes nature. There are certain ways of behavior appropriate to small, scruffy dogs, which are, in fact, welded into the genes. You can't just become small dog-shaped and hope to stay the same person. A certain intrinsic small dogness begins to permeate your very being. He'd already chased a rat. It had been the most enjoyable experience in his life. Serve 'em right if we're all overcome by evil forces, his master grumbled. And then there were cats, thought Dog. He'd surprised the huge ginger cat from next door and had attempted to reduce it to cowering jelly by means of the usual glowing stare and deep-throated growl which had always worked on the damned in the past. This time they had him a whack on the nose that had made his eyes water. Cats, Dog considered, were clearly a lot tougher than lost souls. He was looking forward to a further cat experiment, which he'd planned would consist of jumping around and yapping excitedly at it. It was a long shot, but it just might work. They'd just better not come running to me when old Piggy is turned into a frog, that's all, muttered Adam. It was at this point that two facts dawned on him. One was that his discolate footsteps had led him past Jasmine Cottage. The other was that someone was crying. Adam was a soft touch for tears. He hesitated a moment and then cautiously peered over the hedge. To Anathema, sitting in a desk chair and halfway through a packet of Kleenex, it looked like the rise of a small, disheveled sun. Adam doubted that she was a witch. Adam had a very clear mental picture of a witch. The youngs restricted themselves to the only possible choice amongst the better class of Sunday newspaper, and so 100 years of enlightened occultism had passed Adam by. She didn't have a hooked nose or warts, and she was young, well, quite young. That was good enough for him. "Hello," he said unslouchingly. She blew her nose and stared at him. What was looking over the hedge should be described at this point. What Anathema saw was, she said later, something like a prepubescent Greek god, or maybe a biblical illustration, one which showed muscular angels doing some righteous smiting. It was a face that didn't belong in the 20th century. It was thatched with golden curls which glowed. Michelangelo should have sculpted it. He probably would not have included the battered sneakers, frayed jeans, or grubby t-shirt, though. "Who are you?" she said. "I'm Adam Young," said Adam. "I live just down the lane." "Oh, yes, I've heard of you," said Anathema, dabbing at her eyes. Adam preened. "Mrs. Henderson said I was to be sure to keep an eye out for you," she went on. "I'm well known around here," said Adam. "She said you were born to hang," said Anathema. Adam grinned. Notoriety wasn't as good as fame, but was heaps better than obscurity. "She said you were the worst of the lot of them," said Anathema, looking a little more cheerfully. Adam nodded. "She said, 'You watch out for them, miss. They're nothing but a pack of ringleaders. That young Adam's full of the old Adam,' she said." "What have you been crying for?" said Adam bluntly. Oh, I just lost something," said Anathema. "A book." "I'll help you look for it if you like," said Adam gallantly. "I know quite a lot about books, actually. I wrote a book once. It was a terrific book. It was nearly 8 pages long. It was about this pirate who was a famous detective. And I drew the pictures." And then, in a flash of largeness, he added, "If you like, I'll let you read it. I bet it was a lot more exciting than any book you've lost, especially the bit in the spaceship where the dinosaur comes out and fights with the cowboys. I bet it'd cheer you up, my book. It cheered up Brian no end. He said he'd never been so cheered up." "Thank you. I'm sure your book is a very good book," she said, endearing herself to Adam forever. "But I don't need you to help me look for my book. I think it's too late now." She looked thoughtfully at Adam. "I expect you know this area very well," she said. "For miles and miles," said Adam. "You haven't seen 2 men in a big black car," said Anathema. "Did they steal it?" said Adam, suddenly full of interest. Foiling a gang of international book thieves would make a rewarding end to the day. "Not really. Sort of. I mean, they didn't mean to. They were looking for the manor, but I went up there today, and no one knows anything about them. There was some sort of accident or something, I believe." She stared at Adam. There was something odd about him, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She just had an urgent feeling that he was important and shouldn't be allowed to drift away. Something about him. "What's the book called?" said Adam. "The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter, Witch," said Anathema. "Witch what?" No, witch, like in Macbeth, said Anathema. I saw that, said Adam. It was really interesting, the way the king carries on. Gosh, what's nice about him? Nice used to mean, well, precise or exact. Definitely something strange, a sort of laid-back intensity. You started to feel that if he was around, then everyone else, even the landscape, was just background. She'd been here a month, except for Mrs. Henderson, who in theory looked after the cottage and probably went through her things, given half a chance. She hadn't expected more than a dozen real words with anyone. She let them think she was an artist. This was the kind of countryside that artists liked. Actually, it was bloody beautiful. Just around this village, it was superb. If Tanner and Landerseer had met Samuel Palmer in a pub and worked it out, and then got Stubbs to do the horses, it couldn't have been better. And that was depressing because this was where it was going to happen, according to Agnes anyway, in a book which she, Anathema, had allowed to be lost. She had the file cards, of course, but they just weren't the same. If Anathema had been in full control of her own mind at that moment, and no one around Adam was ever in full control of his or her own mind, she'd have noticed that whenever she tried to think about him beyond a superficial level, her thoughts slipped away like a duck off water. Wicked, said Adam, who had been turning over in his mind the implications of a book of nice and accurate prophecies. It tells you who's going to win the Grand National, does it? No, said Anathema. Any spaceships in it? Not many, said Anathema. Robots? Said Adam hopefully. Sorry. Doesn't sound very nice to me then, said Adam. Don't see what the future's got in it if there's no robots and spaceships. About 3 days, thought Anathema glumly. That's what it's got in it. Would you like a lemonade? She said. Adam hesitated. Then he decided to take the bull by the horns. Look, excuse me for asking if it's not a personal question, but are you a witch? He said. Anathema narrowed her eyes. So much for Mrs. Henderson poking around. Some people might say so, she said. Actually, I'm an occultist. Oh, well, that's all right then, said Adam, cheering up. She looked him up and down. You know what an occultist is, do you? She said. Oh, yes, said Adam confidently. Well, so long as you're happier now, said Anathema. Come on in. I could do with a drink myself. And Adam Young? Yes. You were thinking. Nothing wrong with my eyes. They don't need examining, weren't you? Who? Me? Said Adam guiltily.